It's 2027. The strange part isn't that you're a billionaire. The strange part is that nobody knows. Not your neighbors, not the people you see every morning at the coffee shop, not even the guy who waves at you while walking his dog every evening. And to them, you're just another person. A normal house, a normal car, a normal life. And that's exactly how you designed it. Every morning starts the same way. You wake up at 6:12, not because you have to, because after years of doing it, your body refuses to sleep longer. You walk into the kitchen, you make coffee, you stand by the window and watch the neighborhood slowly wake up. Across the street, someone is already rushing to work. A delivery truck rolls past. A teenager waits for the school bus while staring at his phone. Everything looks ordinary. The funny thing is, you're worth more than everyone on this street combined, and nobody has the slightest idea. Your phone vibrates. Most people dream about receiving life-changing notifications. You don't? Because they arrive every day, the screen lights up. A property management company has deposited another $84,000 into one of your accounts. You barely look at it. You swipe the notification away, not because the money isn't real, because you've learned something most people never understand. The first million changes your life. The 100th million changes your options. But eventually, the numbers stop feeling like numbers. They become background noise. The coffee still tastes the same. The sunrise still looks the same. And you still need to decide what you're having for breakfast. That's the part nobody tells you. People imagine billionaires living inside some endless movie, private jets, luxury yachts, champagne, parties, attention. But real wealth often looks boring, painfully boring, especially when nobody knows you have it. A few hours later, you're standing in line at a hardware store. The man in front of you is complaining about inflation. The cashier is talking about rising rent. Someone behind you is discussing stock market losses. You listen quietly. Nobody asks your opinion. Nobody knows your investment portfolio generated more money this month than most people will earn in 10 years. And honestly, you prefer it that way because attention is expensive. The moment people know what you have, everything changes. Conversations change, relationships change, expectations change. People stop seeing you, they start seeing your money. You learned that lesson years ago, and it cost you more than money. It cost you trust. Back in 2019, before anyone could have imagined where this path would lead, you made a decision that seemed completely insignificant at the time. A decision so small that nobody remembers it, not even you, at least not clearly. But that tiny decision became the first domino, and once it started falling, it never stopped. The strange thing about becoming wealthy isn't the money, it's how ordinary the beginning looks. Because when people hear billionaire stories, they expect dramatic moments. A breakthrough, a genius invention, a lucky investment, something exciting. Your story began with a parking lot, and what happened there changed everything. It starts with a parking lot, not the kind of place anyone thinks about twice. Just concrete, cars, a faded sign, people rushing in and out without looking around. But you notice something most people don't, that this one small parking lot never stayed empty. Morning full, afternoon full, even late at night still half occupied. And it wasn't in a rich area, it was in a place most investors would ignore completely. That's what made you stop. You didn't see a parking lot, you saw behavior. You stood there for almost 10 minutes just watching. People didn't care about the paint, they didn't care about the lighting. They just needed a place to leave their car because life doesn't pause for parking problems. And that's when it hit you. The most boring things in the world are usually the most profitable. Not flashy, not exciting, just necessary. You went home that night and did something you'd never done before. You started searching for ownership records. Who owns parking lots like this? Who collects the money every single day while everyone else walks past it without thinking? The answer wasn't a big company. It wasn't a famous investor. It was a private owner, someone who had quietly built a system out of things nobody pays attention to: parking spaces, small commercial plots, old buildings with steady tenants, nothing viral, nothing impressive on social media, but extremely consistent cash flow. That night, you didn't sleep much because for the first time, you realized something uncomfortable. You had been thinking too loudly. Big ideas, big startups, big competition. But real wealth was hiding in silence. The next morning, you went back to that same parking lot. This time, you didn't just watch. You measured, you checked traffic patterns, peak hours, weekend flow. You even noted how many cars circled before leaving. And then you made your first move. It wasn't a big investment, not even close. It was small enough that if it failed, nobody would notice. But if it worked, it could change everything. You didn't tell anyone, not your friends, not your family, not even the people closest to you, because deep down, you already understood something important. The moment you explain it, you risk losing it. So you stayed quiet, and you built your first piece of the hidden system, a system nobody would ever associate with you. But it was already starting, and you had no idea how far it would go. The first real test came faster than you expected. A small piece of land near a busy road. Nothing special. Dusty, slightly uneven ground. The kind of place most people would ignore while driving past, but you already saw it differently. Not land, opportunity. You bought it quietly. No announcement, no celebration, no big move post on social media, just paperwork, signed, done, and then you waited. The first week, nothing changed. The second week, still nothing. The third week, you started questioning it a little, not because you doubted the idea, but because silence has a way of testing patience. Then something small happened. A local vendor asked if they could use part of the space, just temporarily, for storage. You agreed. Not for much money, barely anything, honestly, but you said yes because you weren't thinking about income yet. You were thinking about flow, how money moves, how people use space, how value quietly builds when nobody is watching. Within a month, 2 more vendors showed up. Then a small delivery company asked for weekend use. Then a food truck started parking there every evening. Nothing planned, nothing forced. It just started happening naturally, like the place was pulling activity toward itself. And that's when the first real number hit your account. It wasn't huge, it wasn't life-changing on its own, but it was consistent. For the first time, you saw something important. It worked without you. No meetings, no daily effort, no constant attention, just a system doing its job in the background. You remember sitting in your car that night looking at your phone screen. The number wasn't impressive, but what it represented was proof. You didn't need a big idea. You needed the right kind of boring idea, the kind people overlook because it doesn't look exciting enough. That's where the real edge was. And slowly, one small asset turned into 2, then 3, then more, each one slightly different, but all built on the same principle. Things people need every day, not wants, needs, parking, space, access, utility. By the time anyone around you started noticing anything different, it was already too late because the system was already running quietly and expanding, and you were still living the same life on the outside, same clothes, same routine, same face people recognized but never questioned. That was the point. Nobody looks twice at ordinary, and that's exactly how you stayed hidden. By the time the system started scaling, you didn't even call it a business anymore. It felt more like a pattern, a repeating pattern that kept showing up in different places, different cities, different types of small assets that nobody cared about. But the money was starting to notice, quietly. At first, it was just small jumps. A few thousand here, then a few more there. Nothing dramatic enough to change your life overnight, but enough to change your thinking. Because once you see something working repeatedly, you stop seeing it as luck. And that's when things start to shift. You remember the first time a single month crossed 6 figures. You didn't celebrate, not because you weren't happy, but because your brain didn't process it as new life moment. It processed it as, okay, this is becoming stable. And stability is a dangerous thing when it starts growing quietly because it removes fear. And when fear goes away, people start taking bigger steps without even realizing it. You reinvested, not aggressively, just consistently. 1 asset became 2, 2 became 5, 5 became 10, each one slightly different, but all built on the same invisible logic. If people need it every day, it probably has value. And if it has value, someone is already paying for it. The trick was never to compete. The trick was to find things that don't even feel like competition exists. That's when you stepped into something most people never see from the inside. Not startups, not flashy investments, not crypto hype, but slow systems. The kind that don't post updates, the kind that don't trend, the kind that just quietly collect money in the background while the world argues about everything else. But with growth came something unexpected. Pressure. Not financial pressure, emotional pressure. Because the bigger it got, the harder it became to keep it hidden. Friends started asking questions like, what are you doing these days? Why are you always busy? How come you never stress about money anymore? And you learned quickly how to answer without answering. You stayed vague, safe, simple, just enough to sound normal. But inside, things were no longer normal at all. You started noticing patterns in people, not what they say, but what they assume. The moment they think you're average, they relax around you, they talk freely, they stop calculating, they stop performing, and that became your shield. Because the truth was simple. The more ordinary you looked, the safer everything became. But there was one problem. Wealth doesn't stay invisible forever. It starts leaking, not through luxury, but through behavior, choices, timing, opportunities you suddenly have access to. And one day, it happened. A moment that almost exposed everything. It wasn't planned, it wasn't dramatic, it was a normal conversation at a normal place with a normal person who asked a very normal question, but your answer was not normal. And for the first time, someone looked at you differently. Not fully, not clearly, but enough to make you realize something important. You might be hidden, but you are not invisible. And that realization changed the next phase of everything. The moment everything changed didn't feel like a moment at all. It felt normal. That's the strange part. Nobody tells you about real wealth. There is no explosion, no big announcement, no sudden shift in the air, just another Thursday. You were sitting in your car outside a small cafe when your phone lit up again. Another update, another quiet confirmation. Your portfolio had crossed a number that most people only imagine when they say things like, if I ever won the lottery. But you didn't feel excited, not in the way people expect. You just stared at it, then locked your phone and ordered coffee because life still continued. That's when it hit you the hardest. Money doesn't replace life. It runs beside it, silently, almost invisibly. Years ago, you thought wealth would change everything, your routines, your emotions, your identity, but instead it only changed your options, and options are quiet. Over time, your world became split into two layers, the visible life and the real one. The visible life was simple, same streets, same people, same conversations about bills, work, and everyday stress, and you stayed in that layer on purpose because it protected the other one. The real life was something no one around you could see. Assets spreading across places nobody talked about. Income streams that didn't require your presence. Systems that ran even when you forgot they existed. It wasn't flashy. It was invisible engineering. And the deeper it went, the more careful you became. Not because you were scared of losing money, but because you understood something most people never learn. Visibility attracts interference, and interference destroys systems. So you stayed quiet. You became consistent and you kept building, but the hardest part was never the money. It was the isolation, not loneliness in the usual sense, but something deeper. The inability to fully explain your life to anyone without breaking it. Because how do you tell someone, I don't really work anymore, but I'm always working, or I'm financially free, but I can't talk about it? So you stopped trying, and that silence became part of your identity. Then came the final turning point, the moment everything quietly confirmed itself. It wasn't a celebration, it wasn't a headline, it was a report, a simple document, numbers arranged neatly on a page, years of decisions compressed into lines and columns, and at the bottom of it, a reality that felt almost unreal at first. You were no longer building wealth, you were maintaining it. That shift changes everything because building is emotional, maintaining is strategic, and strategy removes fear. That night, you didn't do anything special. You didn't call anyone. You didn't post anything. You didn't even leave the house. You just sat there thinking about how far away you felt from the version of yourself who started all this, the version who first noticed a parking lot and wondered who owned it. That version would never believe where it led. And maybe that's the point. Success doesn't always feel like success while you're inside it. Sometimes it just feels like responsibility and quiet awareness. The next morning, you did what you always do. You woke up early, you made coffee, you checked things briefly, and then you went outside. The world looked exactly the same. People rushing, cars moving, life continuing without pause. No one knew, no one asked, no one cared. And for the first time, you understood something very clearly. Being hidden was never about hiding money. It was about protecting your life from becoming something you no longer control. You didn't become a billionaire in 2027 because of luck or timing or genius. You became it because of repetition, boring decisions, ignored opportunities, small moves that never looked impressive alone, but together built something massive. And now, standing in a world that still sees you as ordinary, you realize the truth. The real hidden billionaires aren't hidden because they can't be seen. They're hidden because they choose not to be. And that choice is the most powerful asset of all.